Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Prajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Prajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad-gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Sorry. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 18th day of April, 2023, in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 15, entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. Text number 6, on page 597. Na tad bhasayate Suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yadgatva na navartante tadhama padamam mama na tadbhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakaha yadgadva nanavartante tadhama padamang mama natadbhasayate suryo nasashanko napavakaha yadgadva nanavartante tadhama padamang mama natadbhasayate suryo nasashanko napavakaha yadgadva nanavartante tadhama padamang mama natadbhasayate suryo nasashanko napavakaha yadgadva nanavartante tadhama padamang mama natadbhasayate suryo nasashanko napavakaha yadgadva nanavartante tadhama padamang mama. Na, not, tat, that, bhasyate, illuminates, suryaha, the sun, na, nor, shashankaha, the moon, na, nor, pavakaha, fire, electricity. Yat, where, gatva, going, na, never, nivartante, they come back. Tat dhamma, that abode, padamam, supreme, mama, my. Page 597. Translation. Krishna says, that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Purport. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishnaloka, Goloka Vrindavana, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all these planets, called Vaikunthas, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavana. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavana. As long as a living entity is in this dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service is described. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramam mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is paramam, full of 6 opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2.2.15 also confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra suryo bhati, na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is a little hint in this verse of what the spiritual world is like, and it's all in terms of illumination. In the Brahma Samhita, we hear Yasya Prabha Pabhavato Dagadanda Koti Koti Svashesha Vasudhari Vibhuti Bhinnam Tad Brahma Nishkanam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajani. That his Prabha, his effulgence, Govinda's effulgence, is the Brahma Jyoti. It's all actually emanating originally from Krishna himself. And that Brahma Jyoti we hear at the beginning of the 14th chapter, remember, it described how Krishna says, I am the father of all living entities. He says, Sarva yonishu konteya murtiyak sambhavantiya tasam brahma maharyone aham bija badakpata. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. And what is that material nature called here? Brahma. Mahadyoni, the source of birth. So the whole material energy can also be called Brahman. Mama Yoni Mahad Brahma. So this Brahma Jyoti is also this Brahman in Brahma and Paramatma and Bhagavan, the 3 stages of self-realization. But simply to realize Brahman by various austerities, somehow detaching oneself from Maya, is not perfection, and one will surely fall down from that because it's not our natural position. What is that? Haribo. Yen ye anabindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhava ravishuddha buddhya. Arura krishena param padam tata patanchado nadvidi yushmadangreya. This param padam is the Brahman platform, Brahma Jyoti. So the demigods are praying to Krishna in the womb, where they come secretly into the dungeon of Kamsa. And one of the verses they say is this: besides, O lotus-eyed Lord, besides the devotees there are others, ye anye aravindaksha, who by their own mental concussion think that they're liberated by rising up to the Brahman platform, by severe austerity. Just imagine what it's like. As Prabhupada explains in this purport, one has to become detached from the varieties of attractions in this material world and attracted to Krishna. Otherwise, you're going to stay entangled in the banyan tree, the upside-down banyan tree. One branch to another, one life to another, which is full of birth, old age, disease, and death. So, becoming detached is only half of it. You also have to become attached to Krishna, and then the detachment happens automatically. But the Mayavadis, the impersonalists who think that Brahman, the undifferentiated nirvishesha of spiritual light, is the ultimate, they still have to become detached. They know that. Everyone knows that, the transcendentalists, that the attachments to this material world keep us coming back in again. So how to negate those attachments? Well, it seems like through sheer force of will. First of all, one has to be physically detached. So go to the Himalayas, go to some mountain cave somewhere. No more, phantasmagoria of the modern attractions. But that's not sufficient, because there's all those attachments still in your mind, in your heart. So those have to be expunged by severe austerities, mental control, and so forth. And only a very few can actually succeed. But they do. What is it? Trayashtabhavat avishudha buddhiya. Their intelligence is not really purified yet. So aruha, they go up to the Brahma, aruha kutchena, by severe austerities, to the parampadam. Parampadam means supreme abode in general. That's also the Brahma Jyoti. But patantyado, they fall down again eventually, because they're averse to serving your lotus feet. So the entrance into this spiritual world is possible only by cultivating pure love for Krishna. Krishna takes us back, just like there's so many instances in the Bhagavatam. You find the Vaikuntha airplane comes, right? Dhruva Maharaj and others. So that's one very graphic way in which you're taken, back to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha. Going back to Goloka Vrindavana, you don't hear about that so much. That's a different destination. You're not actually... Goloka Vrindavana is a supreme Vaikuntha planet. But Garuda's not there. Garuda's not going to drop you off, the Vaikuntha airplanes. But in any case, the entrance into the supreme abode is possible by developing pure love for Krishna. And also, I think I chanted this verse last class, the description in the Brahma Samhita, near the end of the spiritual world. And it's talking about Goloka Vrindavan there. And he says, Shriya Kanta Padamapurusha Kalpadadavo Dhruma Bhumish Chinta Maniganamahi Toya Mamatam Kata Ganam Nacham Gamanam Api Vangshi Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyotir Chidanandam Jyoti Padamapi Tadasvajamapicha. So that Ananda Jyoti, that Jyoti is the effulgence. So it's describing that there, in the spiritual world, all the beloveds of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, are goddesses of fortune. Shriya Kanta Padamapurusha, the Supreme. Kalpadadavaldhuma, all of the trees are desired trees, all of the land is made of Chintamani gems, the water is made of nectar. One doesn't just walk there, he dances, and no talking aloud, it's only singing. Singing the glories of Krishna. And one can always hear the flute in the distance, beautiful flute sound. And then Chidanandam Jyoti, here we come with the Jyoti again, but it's blissful effulgence, one can directly taste it. Everything is emanating this effulgence, which originates with Krishna himself. And it's a blissful effulgence. It's not just a light. It's actually tasteable. So that's just a little hint. This is a smaller hint, but this is in terms of the what's not necessary there. Everything is self-effulgent. But as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, that as long as we're in this dark material world, we condition life. And that conditioning is, as we've learned in the first part of the chapter, it's mediated or in the form of numerous attachments. Our entanglement in this tree, which is ultimately just a reflection. It's not really ultimately substantial. It's asat. But it's real enough for us in our conditioned state. And it's in terms of numerous attachments and aversions. We have to remember that aversions are just the opposite of attachments, but they're just as binding. If you are holding a tremendous grudge, maybe you had a childhood trauma or something, and and then you have a tremendous fear of going in the ocean or something, that's also a conditioning element. in positive and negative, relations with this material world. So all of that can be transcended, purified by the process of bhakti, because it directly gives us access to the all-attractive Lord in all the different features. Every sense is there, right? You can see the deity, you can hear the holy name and all sorts of other vibrations. You can taste the prasadam, and you can touch the deity. If all the senses are involved, and that way the purification takes place. But it takes training, and it takes knowledge and guidance, and that's why the pure souls, the teachers, the gurus, and sadhus are necessary. And Srila Prabhupada is helping us here with giving us his association through his words, the most important process. And we're encouraged to take it and become free from all of the faults that we've acquired through bad association in previous lives. That's the previous verse. Okay, any questions on this verse? Next verse is a really famous verse, very important. Yes, we have the mic here. I'm sorry, we only brought one out, we should have brought two.
Krishna. So Prabhupada given some importance to Hatha Yoga, because the reason I'm asking is my understanding is your spiritual journey usually starts with Hatha Yoga. That's how we get introduced to yoga, the physical aspect of it,
doesn't
right?
Have to.
And then pranayama, right, which is the breath work.
Yes,
again, these are also considered as sacrifices. These are also considered as you are taking your body through a different experience, right? Whether it's yoga or pranayam, and then finally the bhakti mood, the chanting, the surrender mood. So don't you think all these aspects should be covered to experience the spiritual realm fully, or only bhakti is enough to?
The only thing necessary is bhakti. But Prabhupada said one time, I remember, I think in the 4th canto, because you find a series of instances in the Bhagavatam where great kings, they give up the kingdom and they go to the forest, for austerity, to detach themselves from the material world. So I think this was Prithu, and he was out in the forest and performing all these austerities and just eating the fruit that fell off the tree and everything. And Prabhupada mentions there that he was practicing pranayama, and Prabhupada said that actually when you chant and dance, your breath is naturally controlled, and that's all the pranayama you need. The fact is, you don't need anything but bhakti. I mean, I personally did, a lot of Hatha Yoga, and that helped me come in contact with the Vedic literature, and I gradually, got involved. But once I came to the temple, I'll be honest with you, I was going in the room and I was doing a little headstand and everything. So no, we don't do that. And but eventually, when I got my own room, and I started doing it again. Probably wasn't averse to it. There's a pastime where he was on a walk in Bombay, morning walk, here we go. And there was one fellow on the side of the path. He was standing on his head, in the morning, doing. And some of the devotees said, "Oh, Prabhupada, we don't do any of that." He said, "You should try it. It's good for you." So it's not bad. Just like, Prabhupada's morning walk was a physical exercise, but he integrated it. He was chanting through the time. So you can do these things. It's not necessary, but it can help to keep the body strong and healthy, for devotional service. But we shouldn't think that, oh boy, if I can't do Hatha Yoga, I can't do Bhakti Yoga. It's not like that. Bhakti Yoga itself is completely sufficient, and it keeps you healthy, chanting and dancing. Okay, should we go on? This next verse is extremely important, very often quoted. Mamaya Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha Manakshashtani Indriyani Prakatistani Karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Purport. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like Lord Ram, Nrsimhadev, Vishnumurti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, these separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of when the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse, that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body, with the mind and the senses. And when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandinayana Shruti. Sattva esha brahmanishta idam shariram matyam atisrijya brahmabhisampadya brahmana pashyati brahmana shrunoti brahmanaya vedam sarvam anubhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up his material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in this spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti also it is understood, Vasanti yatra purusha sarve vaikunta murtayaha. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there's no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Mamai Vangshaha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here, because the Sanskrit word sanatan, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehinosmin yatha dehe. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. So this is a very, very important verse. And it's interesting, this first line, Mama Vangsha Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, that these jivas in the material world are my anksha, parts and parcels. Just like a little drop of water is in the ocean, it has the same chemical combination. The sun ray has a little bit of heat, a little bit of light, and the sun has infinite, practically, inconceivable amount of heat and light. So the same quality is there, but the Sanatan part is very important. Is that we always remain fragmental portions of the Lord. But we never lose that portion either, that qualitative oneness with the Lord. We never merge, lose our identity, but we never become the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Brahman. And then what's going on in the material world, manakshastan indriyani prakritistani karshati, that we are being dragged by the mind, actually, from one body to another, and the mind is situated, it's one of the six senses. This is shashta. So mind and the normal five knowledge acquiring senses that we know. Prakriti stani, we're situated in material nature, and we're being dragged by the attachments of those things to one body to another, one body to another. So how to get free from this, we learned at the end of the last chapter. Mam chayova bicharena bhakti yogena sevate sogunan samatitetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. By the practice of unfailing pure devotion to Krishna, avyabhicharena bhakti yogena, says sogunansam, and one can transcend the modes of nature. As Prabhupada mentions in the purport, when in the conditioned state, the mind is under the spell of the different modes of nature. And so that mind is directing the senses, do this, go here, let's try to get that, let's get away from that. It's attraction, aversion. So that goes on life after life. But once the mind is directed toward Krishna by the process of bhakti yoga, remember back in the 6th chapter, we learned that the mind can be the best friend or the worst enemy. So that mind that's filled with all kinds of material desires is our worst enemy. The soul. The soul is simply being carried from one body to another by that conditioned mind. We're going to learn that in the next verse, how that happens. The mind, or the internal body, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, that doesn't perish when the physical body goes. But during our life, we have been conditioning that internal body. And that's the template for the next gross body that we have. It's a scientific thing. So at every moment, the whole day of bhakti yoga, it's like an all-encompassing. Avyabhichari means that everything we do needs to be consciously done as, is this furthering my Krishna consciousness, or is this covering my Krishna consciousness? And that's what sadhana is all about. It's a practice. So also one of the things that came up when I was reading this is that, so we go from body to body, and these are all false identities. These aren't us. Right, we know that from the beginning. This is just like a quote of a set of clothes that we're wearing. Eventually give it up. Valsangti jirinana yata vihaya, because it says the 2nd chapter. So, but we so much identify in the conditioned state. We're identifying with this body. And that's why it's such a disturbing thing that happens, that as you get older, and oh my God, I can't enjoy like I used to. So there's billions of dollars spent trying to stay a little younger, all these things. It's a tragic situation. The glorious spirit soul, which has its home in Goloka Vrindavana, enjoying with God, has become groveling around in the material world here, trying to enjoy a little sense gratification. Now, real devotees, who are experiencing a little bit, even the first inklings of their eternal relationship with Krishna, they try to help others, like Prahlad Maharaj says. Shoshe Tatova Makachetasa Indriyata Maya Sukaya Badamudvahito Vimudhan. I have no problem personally, he's telling Nrsingadev. Nayabod Vijay, I'm not disturbed at all. Paradodate Vaitaranyas. Because I'm with you across the Vaitarani river, the barrier between the material and spiritual world. I'm already there, and any time I want, I can simply sing your glories and dive my consciousness into the ocean of bliss. I don't have any problem, you know. But I am lamenting. Why are you lamenting? For all these fools and rascals, he calls them, you know, the Maya Sukaya, the trying to enjoy the illusory happiness, and then this goes bottom, the great burden of arranging this material energy so somehow you enjoy a little flickering happiness. But he knows that this is a suicidal thing. So he's feeling empathy, sympathy, and he wants to try to help them. That's the real mood of the Vaishnava. So you know, this verse is so significant and seminal for who are we really, and what does mukti really consist of? This famous phrase from a verse in the second canto, mukti, defining mukti. From bhakti point of view, from the actual point of view, mukti hitva anyata rupam swarupena vivastati. All of these anyata rupam, we are in a different rupa, even in this one body. So many rupas, so many forms we go through, right? As we go through, and then there's who knows, there are countless other forms we've inhabited. So mukti means giving them all up, you know, not hankering for anyone and not heading for anyone. Swarupena vavastati, and to be situated in your swarup. Swarup means your actual form. We all have an eternal form, which is just suitable for the service that we are naturally suited to render to Krishna. That's our rasa, distinct rasa. So that rupa is now a mystery to us, but we should have faith that it's there, and the process of bhakti awakens it. That's the whole idea. And when it's fully awakened and we're situated, even in this body, serving in that form, we're liberated. Liberated means we have no attraction for this material world. We're not coming back. We're only here temporarily, and we use whatever time we have to render service to Krishna and try to give others the chance. That's the perfection. So what is that Swarup? That's the first teaching, Lord Chaitanya, to Sanatana Goswami. Jivera Swarupoi Krishnera Nityadas. But he goes on. Jivera Tatasta Shakti Bheda Bhed Prakash. That's also very important. And who are the jivas? The jivas are the marginal entity. Tatasta, we're on the margin. It means that we can go into the material world or we can stay in the spiritual world. We have that free choice. And inconceivably, everything is, including the living entities, are one with and different from Krishna. So this is Lord Chaitanya's essential teaching, and very important to understand. Okay, any discussion on this verse or purport? All of these should be studied very carefully. Okay, text 8. Shadidam yadavapnoti yatchapyut kramatishvara ishvara grihidvaitani sangyati Vayugandhani Bhashiyat. The living entity in the material world carries the different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. This is a very nice analogy Krishna gives here. Purport. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or dog, excuse me, he is sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. Arjun, see if you can get some water. If there's any water. Thanks. He's sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishnaloka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. Thus, this process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karshati, or struggle for existence. So, this idea of the gandha, bio-gandha nivashya. So the living entity carries the different conceptions of life from one body as the air carries aromas. So those conceptions we're creating at every moment of our life. We don't realize the responsibility we have, that we are making our own destiny. And even in a difficult circumstance, everyone relates to it in a certain way. Some people can just freak out if there's some danger, or some people will call out to Krishna as helplessly. That's what the training is. We're training. Because at a certain point, the body is going to be finished. It's going to be at the point of death. So at that point, if you can either physically or at least internally call out to Krishna, because you're trained to do that, you've trained to do that, then that's an auspicious leave. You may go back then or come back, get born in a devotee family, which is all auspicious, whatever. But the point is, you don't lose anything. So that's what genuine, serious bhaktas do, is that they start to realize every moment counts, because at every moment you're either doing something Krishna conscious or something not Krishna conscious. So that training, and that's the nectar of instruction is so important. There's 11 verses there, but they're essential verses. Upadesha Amrita. And what are those things that take us away? Atyahara priyasascha badalbo niyamagraha janasangascha lauyam chakshadvi bhakti pranashyati. So these are the impediments. It's like anything. If you're trying to become a champion sprinter, so you have a trainer, and they're saying no, you have to lift the knees like this and like this, because you go faster, but you most. In other words, there's things that have developed. There's a science to it, and there's the way of doing it most efficiently. So that kind of training and instruction and knowledge is all important in our effort, because you can't even say it's a life and death business, because it's beyond life and death. Life and death is going to go on one way or another. But we're trying to come to eternal life. No more death, no more life and death, just life. So it's not easy to get to that point, and because the conditioning is so deep. But the sincerity and our determination, you remember way back in the second chapter, we had this verse, Bhogai Shroya Pasaktanam Taya Pridit Chedasam Vivasayatmaka Buddhike Samadho Navadhiyate. So this praising of the Vyavasayatmaka Buddhi means the one-pointed determined intelligence to practice devotional service. This is what it takes, because the conditioning is very strong, and the Kali Yuga is very strong. So it says, Vyavasayatmaka Eke Hakudanan is one-pointed. Bahushakananda, but those who are not this way, their intelligence is many branched. It goes off here and there and everything, right? So what is it that keeps it going here and there? Attachment to Bhoga and Aishwarya, to material pleasures and wealth, to buy the material pleasures. Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam Taya Apudita Chetasam. Those who are too attached to material pleasures and opulence, and whose minds are bewildered by such things, do not attain that Vivasayatmaki Buddhi. So this is very practical instruction. But the efforts that you undergo to do these things is like it's invaluable. In other words, it's the best investment you can make of your time. It's much more valuable than trying to go out and make $1 million. That's just a further entanglement, because you can't take it with you. But you can take all of this effort with you, all of this, anything you succeed in this lifetime to approach Krishna, you don't lose any of it. You carry it forward. Everything you achieve materially, you leave it behind. Mrityu sabhaharascha. So this very nice analogy here. The Ishvara, we're the Lord of the body, more or less. We're taking with us the conceptions that we have, the subtle body, And that determines what kind of body we get. So are we going to cultivate those activities of all the senses and mind that can produce the most favorable consciousness when we finally leave the body? And that favorable consciousness is pure Krishna consciousness, which is evidenced if we can just chant that name Krishna when we finally leave this body. It really boils down to something very simple. Okay, shall we go on? Let's see, one more verse. Yeah, there's a short one here. Shotram chakshu sparshanamcha rasanam granam evacha adishtaya manaschayam vishayan upasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Purport. In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs, in his next life he gets a cat or dog body and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure, like water. But if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure. For the spirit soul is pure, but consciousness is changed according to the association of the material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When, therefore, one is situated in Krishna consciousness, he is in his pure life. But if his consciousness is adulterated by some type of material mentality, in the next life he gets a corresponding body. He does not necessarily get a human body again. He can get the body of a cat, dog, hog, demigod, or one of the many other forms, for there are 8,400,000 species. Now, one point about this verse, which I remember years ago, I forget why I looked it up, but this word upasevate, I looked up in the dictionary, the Sanskrit dictionary. And one of the meanings is, Prabhupada says enjoys, which is perfectly fine, but it also means to become addicted to. You become addicted to, and Prabhupada would give the example of the hog, he really likes stool, this is built for that. But there's, in the human form, there's all kinds of things you can become addicted to. And that again, is binding. Those are the knots in the heart. Adishtaya manashtayam vishayan upasevate. Becomes addicted to a certain set of vishayas, sense objects. So that vishaya, I like to point this out also, that vishaya, the word vishaya and the word visha are very similar. Vishnu means poison, and vishayan means objects of sense gratification. So I think there's a hint there in the language itself. It's fascinating. Sanskrit is such a wonderful language. So it really boils down to practically what we do with our senses here, these eyes, the ears, the sense of touch. All of them, if you think about it, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. And when they are, it becomes very purifying. And you find that you don't experience the passage of time in your life the way that ordinary people do, completely on the bodily concept of life. And that is that the ability to enjoy those sense pleasures becomes, impossible after a certain point. And that's a disaster, because that's all you know. If that's all you know. But if you can get to the point of enjoying just hearing about Krishna, of course you may need a hearing aid at one point, as our friend Ashram Swami, but still, that's possible. So the ocean, or the reservoir of pleasure is always within our heart. We just have to learn how to access it. And that's through the process, beginning with the chanting of the holy name. But I was just reviewing some of I've got when I left LA in 1978, I had one of the rarest possessions. It was a whole translation of the Stavamala by Rupa Goswami. Kushakrata had finished it, just when I was leaving. And I took that with me to Atlanta, where I was going to work with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, Bhakti Sudhamana Swami and his associates. But there was kind of a lot of free time in the evening, and stuff, because we lived about 15 minutes from the temple, so there wasn't a temple program. So I was sitting there, they loaned me a tambura, and I started chanting these mantras. Here I had the whole thing. And it was just a delight. These transcendental sounds. I'll give you a sample. I don't have a poem for all these, but the Mukunda Muktavali. And it starts out, Nabajala varnam champakodbasikarnam Vikasatanalinasya Vispodan Mandahasyam Kanakaduchi dukulam Charubharavachulam Kamapinakadasadam Naomi Gopi Kumaram. And you can hear the beautiful Sanskrit he's rhyming, each line. So Nabajala Varnam, he has the complexion of a fresh rain cloud, Champakod Basi Karnam, and he has a blossom champak flower on each ear, very fragrant. Mukherjee Champakod Basi Karnam, Nabajala Varnam, Champakod Basi Karnam, Vikasita Nalinasyam. So his face is like a blossom lotus. Vispodan Mandahasyam. And his gentle smile is illuminating his face. Vispodan Mandahasyam. Kanakaduchi dukulam. His garments are shining like yellow gold, very beautiful. Chaudabar havachulam. And he has a crown made of peacock plumes, Kimapi Nikolasaram. This idiom, kimapi, often means it's ineffable. It's beyond my words to describe, Nikolasaram. He's the essence of everything. Who? No, I glorify, Nomi? Gopi Kamaram, the little boy of Yashoda, And it goes on like that. But there's like 2 verses for each meter, and then there's another meter. Like there'll be one, Muktaharam, Daduduchakrakaram, Saram, Gopi, Manasimaroja, Ropi, Kopi, Kangse, Kadanakadambo, Tangse, Bangshi, Rangi, Dashitadading, Nakshangi. Now here I'm sitting in this room, there's no electronics, there's no TV, there's no nothing. I've just got this tambura. But it's these vibrations describing Krishna in the most beautiful way. I don't have time to give you the translation. I can give you the whole thing. Anyway, if you want it, this is Stavamala, I'll send it to you. It's all digitized. but there's, these are the gifts of Rupa Goswami. And there are ways we can become completely enlivened. Just read the verses. You may not be able to do the Sanskrit like that. You could train. And it's unending source of happiness, So it's different. It's not material, never grows old. All right, we will adjourn and have a nice little kirtan and get darshan of beautiful, beautiful deities. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. And we'll continue tomorrow. Text 10. Oh yes, Chaitanya Chandra. Is he going to give the class? Maybe.
I think Gaur Keshav told me in the morning.
Oh, the morning, yes. Chaitanya, he's a wonderful devotee.